congratulations and celebrations when I tell everyone that you're in love with me.
Good afternoon and welcome to Radio Lewisham with your host Sejong Mutkumaru. Firstly, I would like to apologise for the lateness of my appearance. There were some technical errors. I would also like to apologise as one of my older episodes, the older episode from last month, has seemingly being left on the recording desk. So if you're hearing about Virgin Cola and you were very, very confused about what on earth was going on and going, hey, wait a minute, I've heard this before. Yeah, I very much apologise. It was a technical error out of my hands. It was left here previously, so I can only wholeheartedly apologise for any technical errors, confusion, or panic you may have been ensuing during this time. I would also like to apologise if I seem a bit off, if I seem a bit strange today, because I decided to have the bright idea of having sriracha sauce with my fish fingers, because I thought to myself, hey, I've eaten mutton curry, I've got Sri Lankan heritage, I can handle any spice in the world, but it seems Korean kimchi sauce and sriracha sauce from Vietnam, I believe, are my weaknesses, so there you go, two of my Achilles heels. So if I do seem a bit off, just know I had sriracha sauce, too much of it, and I decided to get on a really long bus journey and let the bumps and the vibrations of the bus up my stomach acid to the point where it becomes a literal meltdown. But anyway, enough of that. You don't want to hear me rambling about that. Welcome to Radio Lewisham, and as I said, I am your host, Sejong Mutkumaru, and welcome to another episode of Box of Niche. I wanted to play a little song for you, if it would just let me. There we go. Yeah, I wanted to play a little song for you. It's called Congratulations by Cliff Richard. And this will be a topic of conversation for my episode today. So yeah, this is Congratulations, which is by Cliff Richard. And you may not know the song, you may not know the artist, but I guarantee you may have heard this song quite a few times in a very celebratory reasons, whether it be a birthday or whether it be an anniversary. I guarantee you must have heard some truncated version of this. So here is Congratulations. So yes, that was Congratulations. As you can hear, it's a familiar song to some, I'm sure to many, as mentioned, in a celebratory manner for birthday parties and anniversaries and the like. And it's quite interesting because you normally just hear the lyrics. Everyone knows the main chorus. But I don't think anyone's really heard the song, which I find quite interesting because I only heard the song a couple of days ago and I just realised, wait a minute, this isn't a song about congratulating people or congratulating people who have just aged up or something like that. This is about someone in love. They're happy and they're congratulating themselves for being happy, for being in love. And it's more of a love song, which I find very bizarre because I don't think anyone, unless you know this song personally, that it's a love song. It's very strange. I think it's very interesting how the origins of the song has been changed over time. So today on this episode of Box of Niche, I thought I would explain where this song came from. How did it come about? How did it just become birth to the world, to the song that we know today? Well, firstly, it all began at the Eurovision Song Contest. Now, the Eurovision Song Contest is a contest where all European nations and a few other from non-European nations choose their best singer to win everyone over with their chosen song and get the highest number of public votes. So, in 1967, in Vienna, Austria, Us, the UK, won that year with Sandy Shaw's "Puppet on a String," and in 1968, the next year, it was our turn to host. As per the rules, anyone who won the Eurovision Song Contest hosts the next year, of course. So, enter "Congratulations," which was a song that was recorded by a British singer, Cliff Richard, who was relatively well known in the 1960s. He wrote a few songs, but he wasn't, of course, he didn't blow up in popularity just yet. This was still in his early days. But yes, "Congratulations" was a song sung by him. It was written by Bill Martin and Phil Courtier. Now, Phil Courtier did write a song originally called "I Think I Love You," but he wasn't unsure of the lyrics and just got together with Bill Martin. Now, Bill Martin was on the same team that wrote "Puppet in a String" and just changed some of the lyrics to "Congratulations," to make it "Congratulations." Now, in Eurovision on March 5th of March 1968, "Congratulations" was performed by Cliff, who was initially selected in a national final, which was organised by the BBC, to select the song that he would perform at the song contest. And so it became that the contest was held in London, and of course Cliff also not just recorded the song in English, but he recorded it in French, German, Spanish, and Italian. And the song itself was popular in the UK. It became a #1 single, and to the point where they literally said on the day of the contest, it was the favourite to win, and so much so, there was so much confidence, so much enthusiasm, passion behind the song, thinking that this would win, kind of like "Puppet on a String" in the previous year, that the British media literally just went with the headline, "What will come second to Congratulations?" Something that would probably haunt said British press when it comes to the actual song contest. So on April 6, 1968, in the actual Eurovision Song Contest, which was held at the Royal Albert Hall in London, hosted by the BBC and broadcast live to the content, Cliff Richard performed "Congratulations" in the 12th place on the night, after Italy's Marie, Sergio Endeo, and preceding Norway's "Stress" by Old Boar. This song was arranged and conducted by and produced by Normie Pandor, who was the musical director for the event. Now, during voting, "Congratulations" was leading much of the way. That was until, however, the penultimate vote, where Germany gave Spain 6 points, putting them one ahead of the United Kingdom, and it finished second, just behind Spain's entry, "La La" by Maisel, by just 1 point. So that's the origin of "Congratulations." It came from the Eurovision Song Contest. It was sung by Cliff Richard. It came second place, and I think that is remarkably fascinating because I had no idea about where "Congratulations" came from, but I just heard this song so many times at birthday parties and anniversaries. I just had to know where this came from. I always just hear a truncated version of the song, so to speak. So yeah, I just literally had no idea where this came from. Now, as for the aftermath, "Congratulations" went on to be a hit through Europe. In July 1968, the song was included on the 6-track Columbia LP, "Congratulations." Cliff Richard sings 6 songs for Europe. And the song was so popular that when it came to celebrating 50 years of Eurovision, it was the celebratory program was named "Congratulations, 50 years of the Eurovision Song Contest." And even more bizarrely, Richard also performed the song as commemorations for the 50th anniversary of VEE Day, which is Victory Day for World War II, when World War II ended in 1995, despite, of course, it not being written all long after the end of World War II. Now, George Harrison's song "It's Johnny's Birthday" from his 1970 album All Things Is Past was based on this song, and the writers Martin and Courtier filed a claim in December 1970 against Harrison for royalties, and subsequent pressings of their album had to credit their contribution as a result. And more recently, on the Netflix series Squid Game, drama, the South Korean drama, the song was used twice, and that is where a lot of people will know this. In fact, if you go on the YouTube section for Congratulations, the original Eurovision version, which I just played, you'll see some people saying, "Oh yeah, this was in season 3 of Squid Game." I think it's quite interesting how music in that way has always just suddenly become popular again because of certain TV shows, such as 80s songs like Running Up the Hill from Kate Bush. That became quite popular again after Stranger Things, which I think is quite interesting. It's very interesting how streaming services have these shows and they'll just use a certain bit of music and it just suddenly becomes popular and everyone starts listening to it. I think it's a nice way to rebirth and regenerate music that has been long forgotten. So, coming back to Eurovision, so what happened after Congratulations? What happened to Eurovision? Well, in the next year, 1969, at the closing voting, 4 countries had received the same number of points, and they were therefore declared the joint winners. These were, of course, the United Kingdom, that's us, with Boom Bang a Bang by Lulu, a well-known 1960s singer. Spain with Vivo Candano, apologies if I butchered that, by Salome. And then the Netherlands with De Troubadour by Lenny Keur, again, apologies if I butchered that. And then France with Un Jeu Enfant by Freda Bouchera. Again, apologies if I butchered all those names. I am so sorry. But it was the first time in the contest that a tie for first place had occurred. And since it was the first time in the history of contest a tie for first place occurred, and since the rules in place at the time allowed for more than one winner, all 4 countries were declared joint winner. France's win was 4th, thus making it the first country to win the contest 4 times, and Netherlands' win was its 3rd, and Spain and the United Kingdom each won for the 2nd time, with Spain becoming the first country to win the contest twice in a row. Now, as mentioned, it was the first time for all 4 countries tied for first place. They all gained 18 votes, and since the rules in place at the time allowed for more than one winner, all 4 countries were of course declared the joint winners. Now, this caused a problem concerning medals that were going around because they're meant to be distributed to winners and there were not enough to go around, so only the singers received their medals on stage. The songwriters were not awarded until later, and the medals were presented by the previous year's winner, Maisel, after all 4 winning songs were reprised. Now, as for Cliff Richard himself, he would actually represent Eurovision again in 1973 and in Luxembourg with Power to All Our Friends, but sadly it placed 3rd. But do not despair, because not all hope was lost, as some years later, in 1976, in the Netherlands, the band Brotherhood of Man won the song contest with Save Your Kisses for Me. But it wouldn't be until the 80s we won again in 1981 with Bucks Fizz Making Your Mind Up. And then it wouldn't be until another decade, in 1977, in Dublin, Ireland, with Shine a Light by Katrina and the Waves, that we would win again. In fact, in the 1990s, literally Ireland were dominating with so many wins, hence why it was held in Ireland. They had quite a few wins in the 90s and it kept being hosted in that country. Now, as we all know, in the 2000s, it didn't go very well. We didn't win a lot and we never really won. We just kept being known for being in bottom place or second to last, which is kind of funny because before that, in the older Eurovision, before 2000s, we would come second place. We would always come second place. There are many examples where we've always come second place. For example, Michael Ball came second place with One Step Out of Time in the 90s. But it's not all doom and gloom, because we did at least came third place with Jessica Garlick with Come Back in Russia in 2002. Then, of course, as we all know, today in 2022, Sam Ryder finally brought us to the second place with Spaceman in Italy. Some people have contested that win is because Ukraine were going through a conflict. We could host on their behalf, but these are just details. We came second place, fair and square. I believe for this year's Eurovision, Mother I Have a Computer or something or other is doing the song for this year for us, and it's an electronic version, and I'm surprised they've gone for an electronic song. I guess they want to one-up the Germans or the others and say, hey, we're electronic, we can be cool, trendy, and hip and cool, I guess. Which is kind of interesting, because we've always just mainly chose either popular singers or just pop songs and sometimes orchestral songs or just whatever. I mean, I think at one point we chose Electric Swing for some reason, and that got us lost. And probably the most bizarre one in 2012 was Engelbert Humperdinck in 2012. I think he did a good job, but it was pretty strange. But yeah, I thought today I would just talk about the origin of this song, as it was quite interesting just learning about the origin and how what started as a love song became a song that we just use for celebrating people's birthdays and anniversaries. It's always interesting how the origin of something is always different to what we know now. If you look at throughout history, a lot of things have been changed about, whether for better or for worse, which is quite interesting. For example, did you know about Lucasade? We all know Lucasade today as the soft drink company who makes, sport drinks and energy drinks. But did you know that they were actually marketed by a Japanese company called Suntory and created as Glucosade by a Newcastle pharmacist, Will Walker Hunter? And it was acquired by the pharmaceutical company Beecham's in 1938, who sold Lucasade as an energy drink for the sick. It was mostly sold in pharmacies up until the 1980s, before it was then readily as a sports drink across Britain. And it was originally a glucose and water solution. It was the product was sold until 1983 as carbonated, slightly orangey flavoured drink in a glass bottle wrapped in cellophane, until it of course became plastic at a later age. And pharmaceutists sold this to children who were ill, and also hospital visitors would regularly arrive with a bottle, and it was rebranded in 1978 as a pick-me-up and as a sports drink in 1983 to associate it with health rather than sickness. I think there is another good example of how things can just change over time and the meanings. And I always think it is always important that even though things change for the better or for the worse, we should always remember the origin of it, so to speak, or remember what happened at the start. Because the start is always just as important as the end, and I feel like people forget that. And also the middle as well. The start, the end, and the middle, they're all just as important as each other. And I think it's just interesting to also not forget the history of certain things, because I think a lot of people, especially today, have forgotten key parts of history and have changed and manipulated it to better suit their agenda, so to speak, which I think is incredibly awful. As we can see here, this song was changed from one thing to another, and history itself can do the same. So I think it's always good to remember the future, the past, and the present, and don't change a single thing, because that version that you might be reading might have some things that you can use to better yourself in the future, or even more interestingly for me personally, I like looking at the mistakes of the past and see how we've used that to improve and better things in the future, so to speak. So, yes, I would conclude this episode by saying the start, the middle, and the end are all just as important as each other, and that things change, but never forget what the origin was, just because that's also just as important as the change. The origin is important, and so is the change. Well, that leaves me for this episode. This episode today. I would like to thank you for joining me, and I'd like to also once again apologise for all the strange interruptions and everything you might have been hearing. Everything was just going horribly wrong, and I was just panicking. But hey, we got there in the end, and of course, apologies if I seemed off. I've decided to, as mentioned, just make lots of sriracha sauce, and just dunk it in my mouth, and somehow that's tripled my stomach acid to deadly numbers. But that's not really important. But I just want to bring it up in case anyone missed it and thought I was off or everything was going wrong. But yes, remember what I. But yes, to conclude, I would say, as mentioned, the start, the middle, and the end are important, and that the origin is also important, and is just as important as change. And that concludes today's episode of Box of Niche. As we tape it up and kick it back into the attic, I hope you enjoyed yourself, and I do hope you can join me for next time. Thank you very much.